Hi, welcome to In It Together, a podcast about caregiving from Moffitt Cancer Center. My name's Donna DiClementi, and I'm the manager of outpatient social work, and I'm your host for the podcast. Today, we're going to revisit an episode that we received a lot of feedback about, and it's meeting Cassie Wood in the episode I Really Misunderstood Self-Care. Cassie is part of a young married couple, and her husband was diagnosed with cancer when he was just 33 years old. And they had a young child at the time and a baby on the way. So this episode really focuses on a young growing family blindsided by a cancer diagnosis and the ways in which they coped, and the ways in which Cassie coped as an independent and strong woman. So she talks a lot about that independence and how privacy dominated their early days until they decided that they really needed some external support. And she talks about redefining what self-care meant to her. And like I said, we got a lot of feedback about this episode, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. And once the episode is over, we'll meet Cassie again, and she's going to give us an update as to how things are going for her and her family. So if you've already heard this episode, thank you so much for joining us again. And if this is your first time to hearing I Really Misunderstood Self-Care, welcome. And I know that you're going to get some valuable insight. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to In It Together, a podcast about and for caregivers and the people they love. I'm Donna DiClementi, your host and manager of outpatient social work at Moffitt Cancer Center. In each episode, we'll dive deep with a wide range of caregivers to better understand the highs and lows of caring about someone with cancer. You'll meet the wives, husbands, partners, friends, children to hear what worked well and what didn't work well as they became a caregiver for their loved one with cancer. Our hope is that by listening to caregiver stories, you will learn valuable information, plus feel supported, encouraged, and renewed. After all, we are in it together. Thanks for joining us. So I'm really excited today to welcome Cassie Wood to the podcast. Cassie is a spouse, a parent, and a social worker. Cassie, I really appreciate your interest and your willingness to share your experiences of being a caregiver with us today. Thank you for joining me on In It Together.
Thank you for having me.
So, Cassie, let's start off with kind of the origin story, the beginning. Tell us about how your family and you became a caregiver for a loved one with cancer.
My journey as a caregiver began in early 2019. My husband, Kyle, and I were just starting our family. So our daughter was 2, and we were expecting our second child, a boy, that April. Also in April was Kyle's 33rd birthday. So we talked, and I encouraged him to celebrate his birthday a little bit early so he wouldn't miss out on anything fun, due to the baby. So he did. And on March 30th of 2019, while Kyle was out with his friends celebrating, he suffered multiple grand mal seizures and ended up in the emergency room where I was told that he had a mass in his brain. We would later find out that it was anaplastic astrocytoma, so grade 3 brain cancer.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tell us how you managed the beginning stages of that news.
So we live down here in Florida and we don't have any family. So it was really hard to manage it emotionally, physically. I always thought that I was really strong and I could get through, anything, but I kind of underestimated the weight of caring for, someone that you love. I only really functioned in a state of shock and denial. I was really in denial about the severity of it. Of course, in the back of my mind, Google tells you some very scary things, and I was aware of the fact that, Kyle could not make it, but I would tell myself, oh, he never gets a cold. He's so healthy. He's 33, he'll be fine. So I think that really kind of helped me get through it all. Mm-hmm. And being so busy, it's good and bad because I didn't have time to stop and think about it, which I think would have consumed me. But I also didn't have time to stop and think about it. So I couldn't like process properly until later. And I think by that time, emotions had just gotten so big, it was really difficult to process it all.
What do you think, looking back on that time, was the most helpful, and what do you think was not productive?
It's hard to know exactly what was the most helpful. I think just my personality. I was blessed with a very independent and stubborn personality. So I think I just used that to our benefit, that like we're gonna do whatever it takes. And like I'm too stubborn to let anything happen to Kyle. So I think that was really the biggest thing that worked for me. The detrimental things were, I think a lot of people were very positive, and I tried to stay positive as much as I could initially. But, there's really a lot of negative emotions, of course, when someone's diagnosed with cancer. It's horrible. It sucks. Like you're going to be sad, you're going to be mad. And to not acknowledge those in the beginning and not allow myself to feel my feelings, and like it's okay to be mad and sad, like this wasn't supposed to happen, like this is absurd, like that this is happening to me. So I think the most beneficial thing was later on when I was able to like really acknowledge those emotions, so I could be like, okay, I feel this, like now we can move on. And ignoring them for that long was just probably the worst thing I could have done.
How do you think that showed up for you, ignoring those big emotions at the beginning?
I think I was just really overwhelmed. I would get very upset at the smallest things. And I was trying to control everything in my life. I was trying to control Kyle's health, which is, ridiculous. Looking at that now, I have no control over, what's going to happen with his cancer. And I have no control over other people and their reactions. So I think it was just really like trying to control everything I could because my life was spinning out of control.
What did you put into place to manage the day-to-day, everyday tasks of being a mom to two young kids and then your husband's illness? What type of help did you have to have?
Well, the type of help I needed, I would love to say that I got that help, but I didn't. I really needed help logistically driving him everywhere. With the brain cancer, he was having seizures, and you can't drive for about 6 months after a seizure. So I had to drive him to work and to appointments and drive my kids around. So I think that would have been really helpful. And later on, we did start like hiring Lyft rides for him, and that was a big relief for me to not feel like I have to go somewhere, and then I could have some time to breathe or maybe be in my house alone and watch TV without anybody there. I really needed help with those kinds of things, like just grocery shopping and picking kids up here and there. And when Kyle started to decline a few years after his diagnosis, I opened up a little bit more to friends and family about what was going on. And we did get a lot of that help that I think I wish I would have opened up earlier so I could have gotten. And so that was helpful.
So I guess what I'm hearing you say is that in the beginning, and it seemed like even a couple of years into this, you were trying to manage everything as a unit.
Yes.
And then as his illness progressed to a point where you knew you couldn't manage it all on your own, you started to be more honest with friends and family, and they kind of came in and helped.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think, I don't know if it's a pride thing that I wanted to seem like I had it all together and I was handling it, that if somehow, if I was a mess, that was reflective on my person. So yeah, when we couldn't really manage anymore, we couldn't, hide the state of everything, it was finally when we reached out, and I wish I would have done it sooner.
What can you tell other people about how you navigated, do you tell all the people in your life everything? How do you communicate effectively with everybody who cares about you and Kyle and the family?
I think once we kind of let the cat out of the bag about his diagnosis, I just kind of let things happen organically. And if people ask, they ask. If they don't ask, I let it sit. I think I also have gotten much better at feeling out the person. I'll give them maybe a little bit of information, like, oh, my husband's disabled, and then gauge that reaction before I maybe open up a little bit more about what happened. I think that was helpful for me, but I don't know how I learned to do that. I think I just probably did it wrong a lot and learned the right way to do it. But I think it just happens naturally, and you'll have some really bad interactions, and that's going to happen, and you're allowed to have the feelings about those, but you're going to have a lot of good ones. I feel like for every person that disappointed me, one person surprised me in a good way. So it's definitely a balance.
You were talking about you were nervous about what everybody else would think, that you were reaching out for help. But when I'm hearing the story, I'm thinking, it took you 2 years? I'm thinking, wow,
Yeah.
that had to be really rough for 2 years.
Yeah, it was. I think in the beginning, if I would have made a list of all the people that I thought were going to be there for us without me having to ask, right? They would just, oh, they'll be here, no worries. Like, they'll come, they'll move down here, or they'll show up. And I made a list of people who I didn't think would really step up. I mean, I was completely wrong. So I think I was relying on people just knowing what to do and not saying it, and just believe what they should know. They should know that I need my lawn mowed and that I need groceries, right? Like, I shouldn't have to ask.
Right.
So that's the stubbornness in me.
So I think stubbornness, in some ways really helped you. And then stubbornness, in some ways was a deterrent. But it seems like you learned, ask for what it is that you need. Right? We can't read other people's minds and be in their homes to know what it is they exactly need. But if someone were to say to you, oh, let me know what you need and I'll help you.
Oh, yeah.
And you're just like, oh, yeah, sure, I will. But then you never do,
Never.
right?
Absolutely not.
So if someone were to say to you now, let me know what you need, I want to help you, what would you say?
I would say, can you pick up my kids from school? Can you watch them so we can have a date night? Just little, anything.
Okay.
I think the other thing too is that in the beginning, when I did ask for help to people who I thought would say yes, when they said no, it was so hard for me. Like, I took it as a personal attack. Like, how could you say no to me in this moment? So I think that was also unfair of me to expect people to just say yes all the time. And I think it hurt me so much that I ended up hurting myself more I was so scared that people were going to say no also, that I just stopped asking. But you really have to be okay with people saying no, because sometimes people will say yes a lot. So I think that's important too, that I learned.
You were talking too about the fact that you were expecting some people to kind of really be supportive, but you were surprised because there were other people in your lives that just really stepped up to the plate for you that you totally didn't expect. So talk a little bit about that.
I think I learned people are going to say no, and it's going to be for different reasons, and you have to, accept that. But when I started to, open up to maybe moms in my neighborhood who I wasn't very close with, or when Kyle finally told coworkers, he didn't tell anybody for 2 years. He didn't tell anybody until he was actually leaving. When they found out, it was like, strangers can be so kind. They were strangers to me, and they still text me 2 years later saying, how are you? What do you need? I'm going to drop off Chick-fil-A. They don't even ask me. They're like, I'm going to do this for you. And I think it's really important to open up to other people and experiences, because you don't know what is going to happen, good or bad. I gained a lot of friendships and got really close with people I would have never thought I would have. And they just showed up.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Cassie, one of the things that you were talking about were the relationships and the ways that they changed and what was surprising. So tell us a little bit more about those relationships. What did you think prevented people from kind of reaching out to you or kind of surrounding you with what you needed?
Well, I think the biggest thing was that I wasn't communicating. So that's kind of hard for people if they don't know what's going on. It was like ripping a Band-Aid off. Every time you say it to somebody for the first time, it's like real. People react differently. Some people don't say anything, and some people say the worst thing at the worst time. And they, it's not intentional. I think people just don't know how to react. We don't talk about these things a lot, and emotions make people uncomfortable. So I would find myself comforting the people I'm talking to, because I could tell that they were not comfortable, what's going on. So I would find myself soothing them or trying to make everything nice for them when I'm the one sharing, this deep, dark secret I felt like about him. I think, people looking back, I can see how people just react differently. Some people don't handle change very well, or, they're in denial, or they just have to distance themselves because they just don't know what to do. And some people get mad and they lash out.
So, in all of this, who provided care to you?
Oh, man. He's really sad because not a lot of people. I did have a really good friend that, our relationship grew. We actually got close because of what had happened. So that was helpful to have just someone that I trusted kind of listen to me vent. But I think that's really why I kind of self-isolated, because I just couldn't deal with all the other stuff. Like you said, I couldn't be everything to everybody all the time. And I was getting burned out. I think just having at least one person or some place that you can vent, either if it's online or in person, anything is really helpful. I think that's probably the only thing that got me through the first couple of years, because there was no time for me to do much else.
Mm-hmm. You said you were getting burnt out. Can you describe what that looked like?
It was a very slow burnout. I started, like I mentioned, I was consistently overwhelmed by everything. I was angry all the time and angry about things that I shouldn't be angry about. And I don't think I felt as much sadness about what was happening, which was scary to me, because this is a sad situation. But it was just mostly like anger and denial and everything I mentioned before about, trying to control everything. I mean, I was spiraling out of control.
So what helped you get out of that spiral?
So my really good friend kind of had an intervention with me, I joke around about, and pushed me to get therapy. And it was the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. I wish I would have done it even before Kyle was diagnosed. I think it's helped me so much with just like everyday things that we barely talk about, the cancer diagnosis, because there's not much to talk about. I can't do anything about it. So I think just therapy really helped me manage expectations. And, it was my form of self-care, because I was trying to learn how to accept the situation and accept that, if Kyle's not doing well, that's not a reflection of me, which is how I was feeling before. And just learning that I'm doing the best I can, and it's going to be what it's going to be, and it's out of my hands.
Great. Did you feel like you connected well with, the first therapist you saw?
Not at all. I think I saw her one time and I just felt like she didn't get it. So I guess it's the stubbornness in me. I was like, well, let me find somebody else. I think I am now with my third therapist, and I've been with her for 2 or 3 years, and she's going to have to retire before I stop talking to her. It's just a connection, it's like talking to a friend. You have to be on the same energy as this person, and everybody is different, and all therapists are different. So I think it was really important that I didn't give up, and I'm so glad that I didn't go to that first therapist and say, this was awful. Like, right. I'm not doing this anymore. And even after the second one, I went a little bit longer, but I was like, no, this ain't it either. I need somebody else. So it's important to keep trying.
You talked about this one friend and the intervention, I'm putting it in air quotes, the intervention that she did and led you to go to therapy. What other things did you find helpful that maybe other caregivers can try?
I realized that I really misunderstood self-care. I thought it was, taking a bubble bath and going shopping or vacation, but in my situation, I couldn't do any of those things. But that didn't mean I shouldn't take care of myself. So as I mentioned before, I really was doing internal work about, being compassionate and kind and just nice to myself. That was probably a game changer. I learned a lot about boundaries. And initially I thought that just meant, cutting people or things out. But as I learned, you can open some boundaries and let people in and talk about things and be open to new experiences. So I think navigating those boundaries and seeing what's serving me and what's helping me. And it's okay to say, you know what, this isn't working. I don't want to do this anymore. It doesn't mean I'm a failure. It just means I'm going to go in a different direction. And we kind of talked about this before, letting go of expectations, but not just of other people and myself, but, Kyle's prognosis. That was very hard because in the beginning, I was so hopeful. I wasn't being realistic. So when things started to change with his disability and he started to lose like speaking ability and memory, I wasn't prepared because I never really wanted to think about the bad things that could happen. And there's a balance, I needed to be realistic and hopeful at the same time. We hope for the best, but we plan for the worst. So I think letting go of control around Kyle's health and, what's going to happen to him was the greatest.
And what is one resource that helped you?
So I think finding somebody that is going through a similar situation. I connected with a wife at similar age children, and a husband with a similar type of brain cancer. And so that was nice because although we'll never really understand what the other person's going through, it's like we get the complexity of a brain cancer diagnosis. So that was really helpful.
How did you connect with them?
So I found a group on Facebook. I know there's other mentor programs like Emmerman Angels that can connect you with somebody like that. But I think that would have been helpful for me, like a more one-on-one, intimate, where I felt safe to share like what I was thinking and feeling. My kids were really young when he was diagnosed, so I don't think they really understood what was going on until recently. So the Families First, I think, is going to be a good resource for my daughter who's now 6, just to connect with other people and be like, oh, my parent has this too. Like, this is not that it's normal, but this is like, this happens.
Sure.
Right. So it's good for my daughter and my son to kind of see that other people are like us. I wish I would have heard of the Coffee Connection or the Patient and Family Advisory Program earlier. I think that has been really therapeutic for me to share my story and connect with other people who kind of get it as well. So I think that's just really important to know that you're not the only one that this is happening to. And not that makes me feel better that other people are going through this, but, at least we can kind of go through it together and support each other any way we can.
That's right. What did you and Kyle together talk about that you intentionally do differently?
We don't really talk about what we do differently. I think we just kind of started doing things differently. It was very helpful when we started living in the moment, which is extremely difficult for me. I'm a planner, I'm a doer, so I'm always thinking about the next thing and what we could do. But with Kyle's diagnosis, I can't really plan. I can't even plan tomorrow. That's a hard pill to swallow, especially in your 30s. It's fun because I can just kind of wake up and see where the day takes me, but it gives me a lot of anxiety. We try not to get so worked up about little things and just focus on what are we going to do as a family, appreciating the little things that we can. I think a lot of times people and myself before his diagnosis were really caught up in, social media or the perfect life. And, I should be very grateful. I have 2 healthy kids and my husband is stable after a brain cancer diagnosis. But it's hard to see it that way, when you're focusing on social media and what others are doing because our life is different. Now we really try to focus on little things and not trying to do these profound life changes. We don't need to go on this big grand vacation. And, Kyle and I aren't going to go hiking the Rocky Mountains, like we planned. So we really tried to focus on shifting our attention to what we could do. And that was very helpful. And we can just go to the park and hang out for the summer or, do little things that are more manageable with his capability.
So it's been 4 years since Kyle's cancer diagnosis, and a lot has happened to you individually, to Kyle, to your family. So tell us a little bit about where you are now, 4 years later.
Well, first of all, Kyle has been stable for 2 years, so
That's great news.
yes, thank you, a blessing because it's allowed us some time to breathe and kind of live as much of a normal life as we can. When Kyle was diagnosed, obviously one of my fears was a financial fear, and I had never finished my college degree while my husband had a master's degree. So how am I going to provide for two kids and a husband? So I decided to go back to school, and I decided to go into social work. Obviously, I know a lot about cancer or my experience with cancer and disability and Medicare, but I really wanted to be a person that I wish I would have had in the beginning, either a social worker that I would have met or a resource for somebody else. I also volunteer at Coffee Connection as a family advisor, which has been, therapeutic for me as well. But again, I struggled so much on my own, and it was really pointless. I don't know what I was trying to prove or whatnot. So I think being able to kind of be there for somebody else if they want the support has been helpful for me, and hopefully it will help others. The caregiver role was forced on me, and I wanted to figure out, well, who am I? Because I'm more than this. And this was kind of my way of finding myself again. As you mentioned, you lose yourself being a caregiver because you're thinking about everybody else. And so this was kind of me taking my power back a bit and saying no, I'm a human being with wants and needs and desires. And this is my way of doing that.
Is there anything, Cassie, that we've not talked about that you think is important to add?
My biggest advice that I would give myself would be that, I'm allowed to take up space too in this. In the beginning, it was all about Kyle. Like you mentioned, people will ask about Kyle. How is Kyle doing? How is everything? And then at the end of the conversation, they slip that, well, what's going on with you? And how can you complain or say anything negative when you've just talked about this diagnosis that your husband has? And it's not a competition. I'm allowed to have my feelings and my voice and my say in all of it. And it doesn't make me a bad caregiver. I can say no. It doesn't mean I don't love my husband. I'm not taking good care of him. It just means I'm also taking care of myself.
I think that's beautiful the way you phrased, you are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have people reach out and say, Cassie, how are you doing? And a lot of caregivers lose their sense of who they are because they're giving so much to their loved one living with that cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, there are a lot of caregivers that are a lot of things to a lot of people, but they need to be something to themselves too. You have to take care of yourself or you can't take care of anybody else.
I ask this of everyone that's on the podcast. If there was one thing you've learned that you would like to share with other caregivers, what would that be?
Be nice to yourself. You're doing so much and you're responsible for so much. And you need to be nice to yourself when you have your self-talk.
That's great. I really appreciate you coming here today and sharing all of this with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, really, really important. Thank you for listening to In It Together, a podcast about caregiving. In It Together is brought to you by Moffitt Cancer Center's Patient Library and Welcome Center in collaboration with our social work department. Special thanks to Lloyd Goldstein, musician in residence here at Moffitt Cancer Center's Arts and Medicine program, for our music. And thanks goes to our producers, Jackie Beaushaw, Patient Library Supervisor, and Randy Isaacson, Family Advisor. For more information about the services mentioned in this episode, please view the show notes or visit the In It Together page on moffitt.org. Thank you for spending time listening, and we hope that it was useful. Have a great day.
Hi everyone, this is Cassie. I wanted to give an update since it's been a while from when my episode was released. Releasing the episode was very scary. I had never shared my story on that level before, and it was so unnerving to know that people were listening to my private thoughts and feelings. But I did receive a lot of positive feedback from friends and family. I also met some spouses that heard the podcast, and so it was nice to talk with other people who have a very similar experience that I did. My goal with the episode was always to let caregivers know that it's okay to have negative thoughts and feelings about the situation. It's normal to be angry and sad. about what is happening to you and your loved ones, and you don't always have to be the strong and positive one. The episode being released really changed my perspective on my life and life in general and relationships. I'm much more comfortable talking about difficult situations now, and I can gladly say that I'm able to talk about Kyle without crying, which is its own accomplishment because what happened to us is very traumatic. And me being able to talk about it more openly tells me that I'm not letting it define me and I'm not going to let it hold me back. So, all good things since the podcast was released. My husband is still stable and it will be almost 7 years since he was diagnosed. So we are very, very, very lucky to have him with us and be able to take vacations and participate in everyday activities and just watch the kids grow up, which is something that I didn't think was ever going to be possible. One big update in my life is that I graduated with my master's in social work, and that's something that I set out to achieve after Kyle was diagnosed and we experienced what life with cancer was like and how hard it is. So I'm now working towards my clinical license, and I'll be focusing on caregivers and those who are affected by terminal and chronic conditions. So anticipatory grief is real. I'm very passionate about it, and I want to help others talk through their thoughts and their feelings so that they can live their best life. Thank you all so much for listening and giving me the opportunity to share my life and my experiences. It's meant a lot and it's been very healing for me. So I wish you all the best. Take care.